Good morning, everyone. Well, first, I want to thank for this invitation. When Venkat proposed me this webinar and discussion with you, I didn't hesitate, as INSEAD has a special place in my heart. We will talk about my current passion and great industry, which is quite nascent still, but growing very rapidly, and which I hope I will convince you will be one of the cornerstone of future energy systems. So a few words about me. As Venkat said, I am COO of OW Ocean Winds in Madrid. I am there from the beginning of setting this company. So in fact, even before setting this company, as I was working in creation in March 2020. And quickly my career after university, I work at university doing PhD and work in engineering company. Got PhD, left both jobs. Started my own company, which I then sold to Tractable Engineering, and this is how I joined ENGIE Group. In ENGIE, I was first in engineering, and then I moved to energy, various positions. I would say at the end, in 2013, I was heading the region. And then I moved to Paris, 6 years in Paris, 3 years in innovation, setting new business team. As Jean Mestrallet told me, you were entrepreneur, you sold your company, and you stay with us so many years, so you can connect these two words because you can survive in both of them. And then for 3 years, I was head of business line central power generation. And in this job, I convinced top management of ENGIE that offshore wind is, as I used to say, our new CCGTs. Meaning our signature technology, because it's really something for utilities. We see it's very complex. It's big. It's any project is always billions. So there are natural barrier to entry. Solar, there is no barrier to entry. It's just so easy. Everybody can do it. I say it about solar that to do a 1 billion project, you need a lot of screwdrivers. So anybody can do it. It's finally cost of capital competition. In offshore wind, you have both the financial barriers and technical competence barriers. One correction, what Venkat said, I am no longer a member of ENGIE Operational Management Committee, so-called ENGIE 50, as I left to OW is independent company, independent from both sponsors. We are trying to build our own and unique culture, taking both from both sponsors what is best. So I quitted all my functions in ENGIE when I moved to OW. So let's talk well also about INSEAD. I did a few executive courses in INSEAD, as well as CEDEP. I also finished GMP and CEDEP, starting with YMP, I think back in 96 or 97. So long time ago, huh? I don't know why, but I cannot move. Do you see the slides moving?
Not yet.
Yeah, I also.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so offshore wind is industry which started like 15 years ago with say the early days were really I would say prototyping and experimenting, and which is accelerating rapidly right now with more and more countries, as you will see, but it's still very small. It's fairly small. And we are talking today about installed base of less than 30 gigawatt. So there is a very high growth foreseen, very high growth already achieved. And all the forecasts are only getting bigger and bigger. I even once did such compilation of forecasts of BNEF, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which for forecasting I like most because they say they are the least wrong. And they are doing forecast each 6 months, and each new one is bigger than the previous one. They never reduce or stay stable. So it's always going up. Huh? And yes, here you see the geographic distribution. So today, offshore wind is really Europe. And I would say even in Europe, it's really North Sea, with a much smaller part in Baltics. We see now starting in Asia with, of course, China, but China is a market in itself, and say information from China is also sometimes limited. Certainly what is being built in China is not at the same scale of technology. The machines are much bigger than what's smaller than what is built in Europe, but the Chinese companies are catching up. And last week we had announcement of Mingyang, wind turbine manufacturer, and they are proposing now the largest turbine, so bigger than Vestas, Siemens Gamesa or GE. So they are catching up, and they will be present, and they announce also that they want to come with these turbines to Europe as well. Then another market which is almost non-existent today, but with big growth, is United States. And Biden administration really accelerated the program, formulated quite ambitious targets. And I think we have all experienced in the US that when they decide to do something, they do it big. So we are at the beginning of this. And that's it. That's technology really for developed economies. So I often say that to do offshore wind, you need sea, you need wind, you need big demand, because I will show you also that it's all about scale. So forget about offshore wind in Africa, for example, because there is no demand enough to justify such big industrial installation. And secondly, also, offshore wind is still today more expensive than onshore technologies. The levelized cost of electricity is higher. So if you have no restrictions to build on land, solar and onshore PV will always be cheaper naturally. I said no restrictions, so it's not the case in Europe. In Europe, offshore wind is already cheaper than onshore wind, because you have restriction on size of turbines and on size of parks. Here you have more detailed geographic distribution with countries. So the world leader is UK. I have a separate slide on UK, and on France also. So I will say more about them. Germany was, I would say, early leader, but for last few years, Germany is changing their system, the market design, and for a few years there is very little tendered and very little built finally. So Germany will also accelerate now. And in Europe, partially the growth in offshore wind is driven by opposition towards onshore wind. So naturally, I would say the targets are moving from onshore to offshore because of the NIMBY syndrome. So not in my backyard. People don't want to see onshore wind, and with offshore, we can go beyond the horizon and nobody can see. So UK, yeah. UK, as I told you, is big, is the world's largest installed base, and will remain so at least for probably China. Except China, UK will be the biggest probably for next 2 decades. So big project and big plans. Big interest, a lot of competition, which makes the price sharp. I will talk soon about the tariffs which are being tendered. I think the best illustration of ambition of the UK in offshore wind is what Boris Johnson told. And I have seen the quote about UK becoming Saudi Arabia of offshore wind energy. I think that's the best illustration of the big ambition. Really, offshore wind is a cornerstone of UK energy system, and in future, I think also about exporting this power in form of electricity or in form of hydrogen. France, still one experimental turbine only. And what's the problem in France? It's a very long development. So the first projects, the first 4 projects were awarded in 2011, and only first they started construction, and not all of them. So the first project, Saint-Nazaire of EDF with partners, will be operational next year. So you see, it's more than 10 years from the award till COD, commercial operation date of projects, which is roughly double the time of the other countries. Why is so? Well, in France, there is a lot of legal recourse. And now I took 2 French projects. On one we had 7 claims, and one we had 4 claims. So any administrative decision is claimed, and this is making the development quite long and time-consuming. Also, France, with the first projects, wanted to have supply chain developed, so it was not just constructing the wind farm, but constructing factories. So this is how GE factory in Saint-Nazaire and in Cherbourg were created, and this is how Siemens Gamesa factory in Le Havre started to be constructed. And this is changing the rules a bit, changing also the regulation on claims. So the recent change is that there is only one instance. Claims go directly to Conseil d'État. So let's hope there will be a few years cut from this more than 10 years from award of contract till end of construction. So France plans to have a pace of say up to 1 gigawatt a year awarded. So I think we will have also in 25 and 30 and 25 few gigawatt installed, and in 30 it should be reaching around 10. Then if we talk about technology evolution, as I told you, offshore wind is the fastest growing renewable technology, but it's still small. So here you can see the current numbers and the forecasts for 2030. And you see that it's like compared to solar is 10% of installed base in 2030. I think these forecasts, as I told you, that offshore wind, each forecast is bigger and bigger. And I see, especially in Europe, that some of the volumes forecasted for onshore wind will have to be replaced by offshore because simply the society not allow so much onshore wind as is planned and as is necessary. Yeah? So if we talk about cost, you see also a sharp decline of levelized cost of electricity. I don't know whether you're familiar with LCOE term. This is representing all costs over the lifetime of a project. So it's a good measure how competitive technology can be, and a good measure of the progress in cost reductions. So you see the decrease, what we call the learning curve for offshore wind is steeper than for other technologies. And there are many drivers for this, but the first driver is scale. Everything gets bigger. Bigger machines, which I will show you, and bigger parks. And how this drives, I have very simple rule of thumb. Each time applying the same technology, each time you double the size of your parks, the LCOE is reduced by 10%. So that's the drive. Now the biggest parks which were awarded were 3.6 gigawatt Dogger Bank in the UK, and people talk about 5 gigawatt size of projects. So here you see the turbine sites. So what we are installing right now, it's up to 10 gigawatt. What we are contracting right now is up to 15, not gigawatt, megawatt, up to 15 megawatt. I mentioned the Vestas machine, is 236 meter rotor. Mingyang, that's 16 megawatt. I think very soon, by end of the decade, we will be installing and probably contracting in a few years 20 megawatt machines. If we see how the platforms were stretched, I think already the platforms which are brought now to the market, applying the same stretch which happened historically, we will be above 20 megawatt. And honestly, I don't see here a limit. I think this trend will continue. We talked before we started about the difference with onshore and offshore. Onshore, the limit is logistics. That the machines are so big that you have problems to transport them. offshore. Everything is produced now on bank of the sea, on harbors, and loaded on vessels and goes to so-called marshalling harbors or directly to site. So we don't have a size limit. And because of this, everything is getting bigger and bigger. Then technology, a few examples. The one on the left, monopiles is prevailing technology today. I think 80% today it's monopiles, and the remaining is most of them is jackets. So monopile is something like pile you probably have seen on the construction site when the ground is too weak for foundations. You see hammer hitting something which looks like a pipe and hitting it and pushing it into the ground. Monopile is something like this. To give you idea about scale again for the big turbines, the 15 megawatt class, the monopiles now we can install in water up to 60 meter deep. So we need a pipe which will be 10, 12 meter diameter, 100 meter long, and hammer it 40 meter into the sea bottom. And install first so-called transition piece and then the turbine on top. So this is also a good illustration of scale. The others used in remaining, but we see because a few years ago it was 50-50 between monopiles and jackets. Now with jackets is less than 20%. Jackets is like a frame with 3 legs or 4 legs, and smaller pipes, piles in sea bottom, to which the legs of the jacket are fastened. Then another nascent technology, but which is opening a new frontiers, is floating offshore. So the big growth today is on so-called bottom fixed. Floating is in early days. So we are operating floating wind farm in Portugal of 3 turbines, 8 megawatt each. I think now 5 turbines farm was just opened in Scotland, in Kincardine. And in France, there are first commercial projects of 250 megawatt plant. The first tender started for Bretagne. So France will be first country with, say, commercial scale floating projects, and we forecast that this will be really the big commercial acceleration of floating technologies will happen after end of this decade. But it will open new frontiers, and especially in countries like Japan, Korea, and California, where there is no continental shelf. That's the only solution, and will be certainly in these areas big. So here you have examples of a few technologies. Who is winning? We are today backing PPI wind float, but we are technology neutral, and we can use also others. So this PPI technology, this floater is a sort of tripod where you can pump water inside the 3 columns and balance the whole system, foundation of turbine, when wind is blowing, and otherwise would bend the installation. So you can put it in the right angle to increase production. Now, the advantage of floating is that you can go to places with best wind, and also with to places with less conflict with other ocean users. So it's also solving these fishermen problems. Actually, I see in Japan that fishermen likes floating because this is we are in fact creating sort of artificial reefs. So fishing around such farm becomes better. So they like it. Then I mentioned you NIMBY for onshore wind. We see it more and more everywhere. I think you see it also in France. I almost daily read about these protests. So as I told you, this is another reason why part of what is needed to be produced from wind will move from land to the sea and beyond the horizons, and to places with less conflict. The future for offshore wind, especially in Europe, is also a combination with hydrogen. Of course, with hydrogen, an anecdote I read once in Financial Times is the hydrogen is a future of energy and will always be future of energy, because people talk about hydrogen for last few decades and it's still small. There are big ambition now, big plans, a lot of money planned by European Union and different countries in European Unions. We are talking about dozens of billions. So for hydrogen is now or never. If with this big push, which should allow technology development, hydrogen cannot make it to reduce the costs, it will never happen. But there is big expectation that hydrogen will be used both as fuel, as a form of storing energy. And of course, we're talking here about green hydrogen, so produced with renewable energy. And for Europe, such hydrogen is based on offshore wind. So you even have new technologies which combine turbine with electrolyzer, and hydrogen is produced directly at turbine. Prices and costs. So you see continuous decrease. The blue columns here shows the results of German tenders. So Germany has the most common system today is CFD, contract for difference, which means that you operate on the market, but you have a financial contract with the government. And if the price on the market is lower than your strike price in the contract, the government will refund you. If the price is higher than your CFD strike price, then you pay back to the government, or you fund the government, which is now happening quite often. In Germany, the system was peculiar because there is asymmetrical CFD. What means asymmetrical? That if the price is below, the government refund you. If the price is above, you keep it. So the recent tenders in Germany, the developers bid zero. Means government is never refunding them. They just count that the merchant price is sufficient to justify this such investments. But not many countries, and I don't think merchant is the problem with merchant is also that market design is based on marginal cost of marginal producers, and with renewables, the marginal cost is zero, or close to zero. So with our market design and only renewable the theoretical market price is zero. So it's difficult to build something based on zero price. I maybe skip this because it's repetition and we don't have much time left. So few words about OW. So two parents, ENGIE and EDP. So renewable part of EDP. EDP is Portuguese utility, Portuguese national champion in electricity. And in ENGIE, so I'm coming from ENGIE, but we have a lot of collaboration with EDP and EDPR, and in fact in offshore wind, we were doing everything together. We were doing together in France, in UK. So somehow the decision to create joint venture was a nature. Say that we dated 7 years before we decided to marry. We worked together. The teams knew each other well. So somehow this is joint venture is always a risk because it's about merging cultures. But in this case, the risk was smaller and is smaller because it was a very known partner from working together. This joint venture is only for offshore wind. So ENGIE and EDPR remain competitors for other technologies, and it's exclusive and global. And we have, as I will show you, ambition all over the world. So it's 50-50. Everything, all teams, all assets were transferred. And we have a system of rotation each 3 years, and we rotate 3 functions. Non-executive chairman, who is currently Paulo Almirante from ENGIE, who is head of global renewables in ENGIE right now. Spiros Martinez is CEO from EDPR, and myself, I am the CEO. And this in 23, we will ENGIE will take the position of CEO, and EDPR non-executive chairman and CEO. And what is planned is that we will just say step up in our functions, and EDPR will propose a new CEO to have rotation, but also continuation. So I'm sometimes joking that we are truly European because it's a Franco-Portuguese joint venture based in Spain and managed by Greek and Pole. So today we are still, I would say, in top 10. The ambition is to be in top 3. I think it will take us some time to close the distance to Ørsted, which will remain a leader for some time, also with shrinking market share and with less distance, say, with the followers. But we want to be in the group of, say, behind Ørsted, along RWE, Vattenfall. Targets. So what we communicated to the markets when we created the JV, that we want to have in 25, 5 to 7 gigawatt in construction or operation, and 5 to 10 in advanced development. Advanced development means that we have either the lease already or CFD or PPA already. Yeah? And so the project is advanced development means project is sure to happen. It's just the last step of development, which is usually permitting and financing. Where we are, so in UK, we are just finishing Moray East. So we still have 7 turbines out of 100 to go. So normally in 2 weeks, they will be installed. In UK also, we are finalizing development of say twin project just next to Moray East, Moray West. It's almost 900 megawatt. And we are bidding also for new sites in Scotland. In UK, we are based in Edinburgh, and that's our biggest operation today. Then Belgium, we are partner, also not the operating partner, which is Otari for half gigawatt project, CMAID, which was finished beginning of this year and is in operation already. In France, we are in advanced development of Tréport and Damboutier, where we plan final investment decisions next year, start of construction. So say to be operational by 25. And a small floating project, we very soon should take investment decision in low cat. Then I mentioned this small project in Portugal in operation, 3 turbines, wind float. Going to US, we are in advanced development of around 2 gigawatt project in Massachusetts, Mayflower, which keeps us we busy right now as we next Wednesday we are submitting bids in new solicitation round in Massachusetts. So to contract the remaining capacity, we have 800 megawatt contracted today. Still in Europe here, we have BNC in Poland, where we have CFD obtained this year, and this project will be built, will be finished in 26. Advanced development project also in Korea, 1.5 gigawatt floating, and recently also bottom in Ulsan, and recently also bottom fix in Incheon, so close to Seoul, and a lot of other say more early stages projects practically everywhere except Taiwan. Taiwan is a booming market, but we are not allowed to go to Taiwan because of indirect stake of China Three Gorges through their stake in EDP. They indirectly own a few percent of OW, and this excludes us from Taiwan. Yes, so illustration of how the market is in the different countries we are operating. So you see that we are in the right places. I'm accelerating now. Well, conclusion is that we are convinced that we have the right set of skills and the right teams to succeed, and we are in a very attractive industry. And finally, also, what makes a lot of fun, we are doing something good for mankind, for planet. So you do good business in a growing industry, and you do something good. What else you can dream about? And at the end, some pictures of our projects to also illustrate you the scale and the logistic challenge. And any single project is a few billion euro capex, thousands of people globally involved in fabrication and then transport and installation, dozens of vessels, several harbors, so big technical and logistics operation. Well, thank you. And I am now ready for the questions. And I'm already warned by Alistair that your questions will be tough. So please shoot.
Right. So thank you for that, Greg. I will do the job of reading the questions, and then I will also do the job of actually asking the people to speak up and show themselves. All right. The first question, Alistair himself. Go ahead, Alistair. I mean, it says.
Yeah, Greg, if I can see you would have a short trip across from Edinburgh to Glasgow in November. If you had the opportunity to speak to the world's sort of senior politicians, at least the day that they travel to Glasgow at the COP26, what would you say to them?
Well,
what would you ask them? What would you tell them?
Well, some of them will actually travel from Glasgow to not to Edinburgh, but more to Aberdeen, because Moray Force is next to Aberdeen, and our main base is the north of Scotland in Fraserburgh. So there are some the Scottish government one, because this is the biggest infrastructure project right now in Scotland. So we play a role in Scottish government plans for the COP. But what I would tell them is that well, more or less what I told you, that this technology is ready, is competitive. It's a perfect combination with solar, because it's quite complementary. Winter, summer, day and night is quite complementary with solar, so it really can create a backbone. Of course, people always talk about intermittency of wind, but offshore wind is blowing 90% of the time. There is production. And we are 50% full load equivalent, some best places even up to 60. So that's technology closest to the traditional technologies, and is ready for deployment. For advanced economies, that's the right answer.
Right, got that. The next question, what is the relative LCOE today between floating and fixed energy? Richard, I mean, I guess you're asking that for a reason. If you could articulate that, that'd be great.
Okay, so it's difficult question to answer, because we have I would say for smaller projects, let's say like projects of 3 turbines today, we are still say around €200 per megawatt hour. But if I told you my rule of thumb of doubling the size and reducing by 10%. So comparing 30 megawatt project with 3 gigawatt project is just not fair, huh? Because if I do this 30 as a scale of 100 times bigger, well, my cost will be fraction of this 200. For the projects for the tender in Bretagne, the government fixed a cap, which is €110 per megawatt hour for 250 megawatt, and well, we will see next year. I think the award next will be around summer next year. We will see what will be the winning bid, but it's certainly higher than today, because we are not in the same place on the learning curve. But the forecasts are that say around 2030, the LCO will be comparable What means comparable? That finally, depending on depth, of course, nobody will do floating if it's 30-meter deep. Then it will be always bottom fix, but it will be like a depth around 50, 60 meter, from which you will start to build floating, because floating will be cheaper than building deep bottom fixed.
Right, got that. The next question from Carlota Jonti Latino. She's the head of strategy for EDF Renewables. The question, I mean, Carlota, maybe you can
just competition, huh?
Competition, yeah.
But Bruno is my good friend. We used to do kite surfing together with.
Great.
So.
So yeah, I had a question to have your view on what do you think are the competitive advantages to excel in offshore sector, and the linked question will also be how do you plan to scale up to top 3 position, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the how it's by being present everywhere and trying to win projects, and sometimes we compete with EDF, sometimes we discuss, well, usually we compete, to say, and that's I think healthy situation. And of course, it's not. I certainly don't. I'm not saying that we are better or will be better than EDF. I think the fact that we are pure player is an advantage, because we are focused. I think this would be the main difference, that we are really focused because we have no other option. In the top management in OW is really focused on this only. And the fact, I think the combination of the strengths of ENGIE and the strengths of EDPR, which EDPR being a relatively small company and becoming one of the world leader in renewables, shows its agility and adaptation to the market they operate. So I think this combination also makes us strong. So these two things, let's say, focus and combination of strengths.
Thank you.
But I have many friends in EDF and especially EDF Renewables, so I know that there is also a lot of talent and competences. So we enjoy competition. Huh?
Indeed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. The next question, Frederic Lanchen, he works for Saipem Offshore Renewables, which is into installation and construction in the value chain of the business. Frederic, I mean, you might want to ask yourself.
But please, not about the tenders you are bidding for us.
Yeah, so don't worry, I will not be talking about the tender we are doing for you where you are now. No, it's a general question, because you mentioned about the LCOE going down. It is going down for a few reasons. Is because the costs are going down, but there is a very extreme pressure on the service provider, on the contractor, and I work for a contractor. Yeah. Do you think that the supply chain is developing fast enough in the emerging markets? Because Europe is very mature, the North Sea is very mature. I'm thinking about Taiwan, where there is more and more requirement for local content. In the US, where they are asking local content at the state level, not at the federal level. So what's your view on the supply chain?
Well, when I'm talking to politicians, I tell them that the best way to secure local content, which will be competitive, so investments and jobs in the country, which will be able to also to compete globally and export in future, is doing two things. First, creating a market. So creating a plan how the new projects will come and when they will be tendered, so that there is a clear path, that there is a market. It's a market for developers and there is a market for supply chain to sell to these developers. And second thing is infrastructure. So supply chain will come and invest, but they need infrastructure. So especially they need harbors. So the government should focus on this to prepare harbors, invest in harbors to be ready for the investments of supply chain. I think the obligatory supply chain quotas, or even presenting or awarding the offers, combined contract and the industrial commitments, is not the best way. Yeah? So giving you example of France, I told you that the factories were built, but these factories were built and they will produce something which is already obsolete. Yeah? Also because of permitting in France, the permits are old, the technology, and what we are finally building in France, we are always one platform behind what the world is building. So such obligation, I'm not sure that that's the right choice, but indeed we see more and more everywhere this trend. US is very special in this, as you said, it's both federal and state, plus you have law, the famous Jones Act, 100-year-old law. So just to tell everybody what is Jones Act. Only US vessels, so US vessels means under US flag, built in US shipyard, and with American crew, can operate out of American harbors. And there are no such vessels. Well, there is one vessel, installation vessel, right now, Jones Act compliant in US. So we will build in US with European vessels, but they won't be allowed to enter American harbors. So we will have Jones Act compliant feeder barges bringing the equipment on site, and we will have additional lifting operation in the open sea, which is both expensive and risky for safety. Yeah. Because of this 100-year-old law, which is also to protect. So I think this probably is, this strong local content trend is probably one of the risk for this industry, that it will not develop as fast as it could because of this protectionism.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. The next question is about the financing the projects. The question is, what is the appetite for lenders, including private equity funds, for financing offshore wind fixed and floating today?
Well, we see a strong appetite and enough appetite, and but not from private equity. Yeah? So if private equity is too expensive for offshore. So what we see is, so you have two markets. Yeah? You have the debt market and the equity market. Yeah? In the debt market, there is strong appetite for offshore. And we were a bit afraid that for new markets it will be difficult, but banks which finance in Europe, so it's a successful development in Europe, convince the banks that this is a mature technology. So even in new markets, there is no problem to finance. I told you we are not operating in Taiwan. But I remember when still in ENGIE, when we're looking into Taiwan, the financing was and the depth of local project finance market was a concern. And what we see in reality, there is absolutely no issue with financing. There is a strong, and I would say also right now cynically that with the printing presses globally working full speed, printing money, well, this money has to be invested somewhere. So I don't expect a year issue with raising debt. If we talk about equity investors, so our business model includes capital rotation. So we sell part of our stakes. So we want to remain operator in our projects, but say at the end, between 25 and 35% stake. And the rest is sold. And we also see a strong appetite, and we see that the returns that investors are investing is lower and lower. But it's not private equity, it's mostly big infrastructure funds.
You got that. The next question from Jojo Alexander. Would you like to read that, Jojo Alexander?
I have to get, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, no, my question was taking on a point, Grzegorz, you made about offshore wind needing wind, sea, and demand. So to keep the demand and wind being intermittent, do you think there should be development in the energy storage side of things?
Well, that's generally point for all renewables. It's, the offshore wind is less intermittent than onshore technologies. So onshore wind in Europe is. We illustrate this intermittency by a factor which we call full load equivalent. So onshore wind in Europe is around 30% full load equivalent, which means that the park is producing 30% of theoretical maximum capacity. Solar is around 20, sometimes less than 20. And offshore wind is in Europe 50, in North Sea can be even up to 60 with new turbines. So this, offshore wind for this is less intermittent than other technologies. So this storage issue is less, but certainly intermittency of renewable technologies is a fact, and storage is one of the answers. So storage will be, batteries is at least the technologies we have now is more like short-term storage. So it's lithium-ion batteries are good to work with PV for daily cycling. For longer-term storage, it will be too expensive to build such a big batteries. That's why people hope hydrogen we play such role. But I think also we have big reserve, which is only a bit tapped today, is flexibility of demand. Because we still consume electricity the same way as we were consuming this in past. So we don't really care where we consume. Give you examples, for example, on all the heating and cooling. Today, the systems are operated by control of temperature. Clearly, if the temperature goes, we switch on, switch off in the temperature range. We can change it and do the switch on, switch off, increasing this range, adding half degree on both sides, and steering this consumption by price of electricity on the market. Price will be low, and there is a lot of renewable power being produced. So this flexibility of demand will, if we fully exploit it, so demand side management will strongly reduce the need for storage. But this has to come together with smart grid. Everything has to become smart and managed digitally.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my camera was shut.
Right. The next question about the environmental concerns. It says, what about the threats of the pressures of environmental concerns, which might slow down the growth of including offshore?
Well, the environmental analysis is something which is very serious and consume a lot of time. So these years of development is years of monitoring and surveys. Then this is illustrated in the environmental permits, and various restrictions are applied both on the design, for example, so-called air gap, so the distance between the water surface and the tip of the blade when it's moving, when it's down, because of birds with seasons where hammering is not allowed because there is mating of some species in the vicinity. And a lot of different measures. Something interesting there is we are preparing now a bit in Netherlands, where the main criterion of award will be environmental measures, integrating offshore wind with the nature. So they will evaluate what the developers are proposing, and that's the main criterion of award of the site. And by the fact that there are no people in the ocean, so I would say the density of nature naturally is lower in the sea. This is less problem than onshore wind, for example. And so this is something very treated very seriously, with a lot of care. So I don't see this as a bottleneck in future, something which slow down. And nobody is proposing, to accelerate deployment by reducing the environmental care. No, we don't propose this. So we think it's the right way that we spend these years on surveying and the nature and designing the right solutions.
Right, couple more questions. Nicolas Solier, would you like to go ahead, please?
You're on mute, Nicolas.
Sorry, it's very much in the same sense than the previous question is regarding the impact of the blades on the birds at sea. I have no idea what could be the damages, and regarding also the expansion of the size of the offshore parks. How much length could you see the mast of these blades of the base to become?
You mean from which distance?
No, in altitude.
Okay, you know, so first for the height, I told you that, well, right now the biggest, the longest blades is around, okay, I should say the rotor. So the rotor of Vestas 15 megawatt machine is 236 meter. So that's the rotating part. And then there is air gap. So as I told you, there is a distance between sea and the blade at the lowest point. And the air gap is, it's a minimum around 20 meter, 22, sometimes 30, sometimes 40. This is part of the environmental decision. And the air gap is for birds. So the birds are flying below the blades. I don't see this as of course, this is, you know, always very carefully surveyed with aerial surveys, the birds, the migrate. Nobody is building in migration routes, for example. Then there are also special migration corridors designed for birds, plus this air gap. Of course, you have some say collisions, also less than on onshore. And I remember, you know, many years ago when I built my first small 20 megawatt 10 turbine onshore park, which was like 15 years ago. And first year report, I read that we killed 22 birds. I was shocked that we killed so many. But then the report said that that's like 1/3 of birds which were killed by cats in the neighboring village. So it's yes, it is happening, but it's not really, you know, impacting the nature. If properly designed and properly surveyed, designed, permitted, and built.
Yeah, and for the maximum height.
Yes, so the maximum height. Now, if you add the rotor plus the air gap, then you have the maximum height. So 236 rotor plus, you know, 22 or 24 their height, you have 260 meter.
But could you see, for example, this double in the next 5 years? Or, I mean, it's maybe a crazy increase, but
no, not double, because you know with so the air gap will remain as it is. So it will be always a function of the local the bird survey and measures design and permitting. But let's say it will be up to, say up to 50. It's below 50, but let's round it. It's 50 meters air gap. The increase in new generation of rotors and blades will be always few meters, because you know the step forward is this what we call swept area. So the area of the surface which the blades are turning, because they harvest the energy from this surface. So like 1 meter longer blade will increase the swept area by 10%. So here the progress will be we think around 2020 we will have 260 meter rotors. Probably in 2030 we can reach 300 meter rotors. This is what we started already now to permit in future projects, up to 300 meter rotors. And if your question was also whether you can see it, I would say in the new parks are built farther and farther, also because the appropriate areas closer to the shore are already occupied. So this we see in the UK, for example, going farther to the sea. So Dogger Bank is up to 300 kilometers. If it's 30 kilometers, I think you don't see it. You can, with naked eye, if your eyes are very good and the visibility is very good, you can see a shadow if you really want to see it. But above 30, you won't see it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Right, we'll have time for a couple of more questions. The next question is about the hydrogen integration. Siemens Gamesa and Ørsted apparently are building electrolyzers which can be integrated into the wind turbines. And the question is, what are the plans of OW and ENGIE for hydrogen extraction from offshore production? And that's the hydrogen integration question, Greg.
Well, for ENGIE, I prefer that ENGIE has a specialized business unit for hydrogen, and they're working on this. We collaborate with them. So this is the right they're the right people to answer this question, because integration with offshore is only part of the hydrogen business. In many parts of the world, that's integration with solar, like in Australia, in Chile. So in Europe, it's with offshore wind. I have to say that I am rather skeptical in integrating electrolyzers with individual turbines. I think it will be both not economic because of reducing the size of the electrolyzer. What we need in hydrogen today, I think the biggest electrolyzers are like 10 megawatts. We need electrolyzers of hundreds of megawatts, and this will drastically reduce the cost. And by definition, then this will be a single installation and not a distributed installation with many electrolyzers in the park. Can say that producing hydrogen is easy because you just need electricity and water. I'd say yes, but you cannot take water from the sea and produce electrolyzer. You have to treat this water, to demineralize this water. And this water treatment is complicated with chemicals. So you will have additional storage of chemicals offshore, plus transport of these chemicals in the sea. So I think if the park is not too far from the shore, I would rather transport electricity onshore and build the hydrogen factory, so electrolyzers onshore, on the bank. not necessarily integrated with even with the electricity grid, but just producing locally hydrogen and then selling hydrogen, or if there is a gas grid, injecting this hydrogen to gas grid.
Yeah, got that. Yeah, great answer, Greg. Yeah, and Girish from GE Grid. I mean, sort of, he's probing a question. Girish, you would like to speak up? That'd be great.
Yeah, hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for that excellent presentation. So my question is around, nuclear energy and comparison with the nuclear, the offshore. How do you see? Is it as a competition you see, or you clearly see as a no, it's not renewable?
Well, certainly nuclear is not renewable. It's non-carbon technology and electricity.
Imelda.
And well, I clearly see that the cost of nuclear are growing, while the cost of renewables are decreasing. I think nuclear becomes, there is place for nuclear certainly in the energy mix, but it becomes so expensive. Is so long term that it's really, and we see the difficulty. I think that this is not a place for private capital without very strong involvement of the governments, with guaranteeing, even taking equity. And ENGIE had projects in UK and Turkey, from which we withdrew. And we see the problems in UK with financing. So it's nuclear is mostly the financing issue. And this is so long term. The plants are operating, minimum 40 to 60 years. Again, 10 years of construction and 10 years of development. So your capital is engaged 80 years. You need keep a lot of this capital for the commissioning. So financially, it's a very tough thing, and I don't think that's a place for private capital. And we see this, that private capital is abandoning nuclear. Not that they don't believe in nuclear, but this is just so high financial risk.
Girish, your reaction to that?
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking, again, I mean, it's a second question. Is France, let's say, the offshore or onshore wind is not developing? Is it because nuclear energy is at a higher proportion? And is that the reason we're not able to move fast? Of course, the legalities and the laws, they are quite stringent. But how about the given mix where nuclear energy is high in France? Do you think that is weighing?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And also, well, we have Carlotta here from EDF Renewables. EDF is a nuclear operator in France, and EDF is also a big developer of renewable. So I think this is the best proof that there is no connection. The main reason for slow deployment in France is the legal system, and also, if you allow me to say, observation of an outsider, but to live 6 years in France, somehow protesting is in the French DNA. I read somewhere something with the reform of the social security system and the big strikes with railways and public transport. I read somewhere that 80% of population is supporting the reform, but 50% of population is supporting the people on strike. So I think that's possible only in France. And that's, this attitude, it's well, it's a part of culture, and that's why it's slower. So the government, did something to still not limit the right to protest, but make the procedure faster, and change also the permitting law, so-called permit envelope, also make it more like in other countries, so that you don't need to decide by use 10 years before you actually start building. You just decide the parameters, which will be a limiting factor. So all of this should accelerate deployment. And then for onshore, you have the NIMBY, and NIMBY, I see less NIMBY in France than in Germany, for example. In Germany, the onshore wind auctions are undersubscribed. There are no projects because projects are blocked locally. Yeah? So I think for NIMBY, this is a phenomenon in all developed economies, and it's not, France is not the worst here.
Thank you.
Right, I got that. Greg, we will take one quick question. I know that you have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So one quick question. What do you think will be the role of companies like Equinor and Total Energies in this space? Equinor is apparently building the largest floating wind farm project.
Yeah, until Bretagne is built, yes. So Tampen, Tampen is the largest which they are building floating. It's 88 megawatts, so it's still quite small. Huh? But Equinor is also big in Dogger Bank, together with SSE. There's 3.6 gigawatt in UK bottom fixed. So I told you at the beginning that offshore wind is for big and say technically savvy companies, which means for me utilities and big oil. And I think I have proven you that the cake is big enough for all. Of course, we have seen, say, in the last leasing round in UK, when the new entrants like BP or Total paid hefty prices. Well, they say they paid entry tickets. But those who are already, like Shell and Equinor, bid on the level of utilities. So I don't really see here, risk and the competition. The opportunity is so huge that there is place for everyone who has money and who has competencies. So big utilities and big oil.
Right, I got that. Thanks so much, Greg. And I will hand it to Alistair and Jean-Pierre Smith. Jean-Pierre Smith, as we know, is INSEAD 1965. Yeah, please.
So perhaps if I go first, again, Greg, a very, very warm thanks. That was incredibly interesting. I think it's always quite nice when you have a presentation where you're thinking up all sorts of questions and almost the next slide answers those questions. So that's, I think, it's always very nice to have that. But of course, it was complemented by our participants, additional questions. So that was really exactly the sort of conference that we'd all hoped for. And I think with good people like yourself and OW Ocean Winds behind you, I think the future of for our children is somewhat more assured than perhaps the general news each day would like us to think. So again, a very big thank you.
Thank you, Alistair.